Should we be concerned about the Philadelphia Eagles moving forward with 2 weeks left in the regular season after that loss to the Washington Commanders, 36-33 in a wild game in Landover, Maryland? Let's dive in and talk about it, and I hope to ease a lot of your concerns. You're watching Eagles Now by Chat Sports. Chase Senior hanging out here with you, and no matter where you are or how you're tuned in, as always, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day and supporting us. And speaking of supporting the channel, thank you so much for making what we do possible. We're on the chase to 100,000 subscribers. And on today's show, can we get to 96K to get us even closer? 95,962 people worldwide are subscribed here on Eagles Now. So if you want daily videos on the birds, live shows, watch parties, analysis, news, reports, rumors, and a whole lot more, lock us in today. I promise you, you will not regret it. So let's start off the show with this. What if I told you that Nick Sirianni's Eagles scored 33 points on the road, they forced 5 turnovers, they gave up minimal yards on the Commanders' first couple of drives of the game, forcing multiple turnovers early. The momentum was on their side, and they still lost the football game. That's exactly what happened to Philadelphia in this 36-33 loss to the Commanders. The Birds in the process blowing 2 separate 14-point leads. They are up 14-0 and 21-7. And then the Commanders rally for 22 points in the fourth quarter against the number 1 overall defense in the National Football League. And you think about that game in the aftermath of it. Did Vic Fangio's stout defense really give up 368 yards of offense, 5.8 yards per play, and 36 points to Washington? Yes. Did rookie Jayden Daniels torch Philadelphia's defense through the air and on the ground for 5 touchdowns, 258 passing yards, and 81 yards on the ground? Yes, that happened as well. Did the Birds surrender those aforementioned and uncharacteristic 22 points in the fourth quarter and fail to win a game in which it looked as though they had this game in firm control? When you win the turnover battle 5-1 and you score 33 points, the chances of you losing that game have to be like 1%, if not smaller. Because when you win the turnover battle in the NFL, you win about 80% of the games. Not only did Philadelphia do that, they win the turnover battle 5-1. They're up 14 points 2 different times, and they still kind of collapsed at the end of the game. But as always, as I like to say here on this show, context is very important. And not only was it a wild game and a wild ending, everything that transpired within those 60 minutes was also pretty crazy. First of all, Philadelphia had won 10 games in a row prior to this defeat. That is a franchise record for consecutive wins. Think about how hard that is to do. The Eagles had not lost a game since losing to the Buccaneers in Week 4 all the way back in September. But also in this game, Jalen Hurts missed nearly the whole game. He got concussed on the second drive, which severely impacted Philadelphia's offense. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley all dropped critical passes in some pressure cooker key moments. And the Eagles, although they forced all of those turnovers for Washington, including 2 interceptions of Jayden Daniels, they scored 6 points off of Washington's final 4 giveaways. You have to be able to take advantage of some of those turnovers. The Eagles did not. It not only impacted the scoreboard, but it impacted the momentum of the game, and it kept the Commanders believing in front of their home fans. And then additionally, you had C.J. Gardner-Johnson ejected, Jake Elliott missed a field goal, and the special teams unit, which has been good this year on kickoffs, was a disaster. Luke McCaffrey had himself a day with a couple of really big returns in that game. Philadelphia also had multiple defensive starters miss time throughout the game, and the Commanders still, with all of this being said, needed a last-second touchdown to win the game. I'd chalk it up as more of a fluky, insane, wild, once-in-a-decade type of loss as compared to being concerned about this football team moving forward. Also keep in mind and remember, all of the weird penalties that went against Philadelphia. And I tweeted this out when we were doing the watch party yesterday. 110,000 people joined us. Thanks to all of the real ones who were watching the show. The officials were doing everything to keep Washington in the game. And, it started with Jalen Hurts getting up from that hit, borderline dirty, kind of reminiscent of Jadeveon Clowney, spearheading Carson Wentz in that wild card game. He gets up, he says, "I'm good." The official says, "Nah, you're not. Get off the field." Now, I know it was an independent third-party neurologist who deemed that Jalen Hurts couldn't come back, but Hurts gets up, "Yeah, I'm good," and he's still knocked out of the game. But then the penalty on Jalen Carter, when he barely did anything. You had the roughing the passer call on Milton Williams when he pushed Jayden Daniels, yet there's no flag on Hurts when somebody goes down and hits his helmet into the grass. And then C.J. Gardner-Johnson got ejected after he had gotten punched in the helmet. And so, again, I look at this as more of like a weird, fluky loss for Philadelphia as compared to me being concerned. And let's remember, Washington, a top 5 overall offense, and they just won their 10th game of the year. It's so funny to see people in the comment section saying Philadelphia really lost to the sorry Commanders. They've won 10 games this year. They're a playoff team, and it ended Philadelphia's 10 straight victories. They had not lost in 2.5 months. Very impressive stretch, regardless of the opponents you've been taking on. I also have some thoughts here. I thought yesterday showed us why Jalen Hurts should be in the MVP conversation. I'm not saying that he should win it, but he should be in the MVP conversation. How I always like to gauge the MVP talks, take that player away from that team, and has that team look? Offense looked completely different. It was borderline anemic. The pass game wasn't there. I thought the offense sorely missed Hurts, and the game changed once he went out. And it was really noticeable with how the Commanders defended the Eagles. A person's actions speak very loudly, right? A team's actions speak loudly. How did they defend Philadelphia? Loaded the box. They would not let Saquon Barkley beat them, especially after that 68-yard run. And they went all out and tried to stop the run. And the run game was non-existent without Hurts. And Hurts could have kept the defense honest if Washington was playing like that with a little keeper around the edge. Kenny Pickett's really not a threat to do that. The Commanders knew that, and so they crashed to Saquon Barkley on every single running play. And he couldn't get going. He had 150 yards rushing in the game. Sounds great, but 109 of those came in the first quarter. So 41 yards in the final 3 quarters of that game, despite him getting a lot of carries. And so the run game non-existent without Hurts. The Commanders loading the box to stop the run. They were begging Kenny Pickett to beat them with his arm. And I thought he played solid, all things considered, but doesn't have a great arm, doesn't have great mobility. Pocket presence is not good. The accuracy is also off. He was throwing balls behind wide receivers, and while he delivered that big 4th down to Devontae Smith on that final drive and then delivered that 3rd down pass to Smitty in which he dropped it, he made some clutch throws and plays in that game. I thought he was a little bit inconsistent, and Philadelphia became predictable, and the pass game was not there either. Philadelphia also missed the brotherly shove. On those 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, the Eagles could not run it, and I hate running it out of the shotgun, by the way, on some of the short yardage situations. If Hurts is on the field, Eagles are going brotherly shove on 4th down or on back-to-back plays, and the Commanders are not stopping that, and it keeps Washington's offense on the field. It keeps Philadelphia's offense on the field and those drives continuing. The Eagles had 12 possessions that began with a Kenny Pickett drive, right? And the Eagles scored 19 points on those 12 drives. And the only touchdown they scored was on a drive when Kenny Pickett did not attempt to pass. They had 2 possessions that began with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. They scored 14 points on those drives. So the brotherly shove, the pass game, the run game, how the Eagles were defended, it was all impacted after Jalen Hurts went out of the game. So today's poll question is this, and I want to pop this up for the audience, and it'll be the pinned comment as well. Are you concerned about the Eagles after their loss to the Commanders? I want you to give me a Y for yes or an N for no. There is the prompt. Let your voices be heard and sound off down in the comment section. I'm not overly concerned, as evidenced by what I've been talking about. We got a lot more to get to here on today's show, but first, we want to give a shout out to our great sponsor, DraftKings. We appreciate them for making today's Philadelphia Eagles now possible. Right now, when you bet $5, you get $150 if your bet wins, paid instantly in bonus bets. Here's how you can make it happen. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all of the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code SixersChat. That's code SixersChat for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive reward. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/bball. And by the way, myself and producer Chip, we do have a 76ers channel here on YouTube, 76ers Now. Subscribe over there. That's why the promo code is SixersChat. Sixers will play the Boston Celtics on Christmas Day. Celtics favored by 9 points. 76ers as the underdogs here, plus 320 on the money line. The over-under at 222 even. And, of course, odds and lines are subject to change. All right, elsewhere here on today's Eagles Now, all of these factors going into Philadelphia losing. You had the Jalen Hurts injury. In the lead up to this game and during the preview, I had talked about how Philadelphia needed to have disciplined pass rush lanes. And Nick Sirianni said it best after the game. Philadelphia was very sloppy. They were sloppy with offensive execution, with blocking, with dropping balls, with special teams coverage, with defensive breakdowns, and with the lack of disciplined pass rush lanes. And back when the Eagles played the Commanders midway through November, Jayden Daniels wasn't the same quarterback. He was still dealing with that rib injury. He was hesitant to run it. He wasn't as fast. He wasn't as quick. You saw that in this game, that with him healthy, he was more decisive with his runs. He was much more dangerous with his legs. But the Eagles would send 4, and they'd have kind of this wide 9 front. And if you're Jayden Daniels, you're dropping back to throw, and you feel the pocket starting to deteriorate around you, and then you see all this vacant space. There was no QB spy, and the defensive linemen were so spread out with undisciplined pass rush lanes. If you're Daniels, why not just take off and run? The defense is begging you to do that, and there's plenty of real estate to pick up yards. And so that really gashed Philadelphia in this game. Special teams unit, usually all year they've been pretty good. In this game, they weren't. There were bad kickoffs, number one. There was the missed field goal from Jake Elliott, but then there was bad special teams coverage as well. C.J. Gardner-Johnson getting kicked out of the game didn't help this Eagles defense either. They could have used him on that back end when they were reeling. I thought Tristan McCullum was out of position in a couple of big sequences. The Devontae Smith drop, Saquon Barkley drop, A.J. Brown drop, uncharacteristic of Philadelphia and those star players to make those mistakes in some of those big moments. When you're playing with the backup quarterback, you got to do everything to lift him up. And you're going to have to pitch nearly a perfect game. And the Eagles just didn't do that. And I thought the Eagles' interior offensive line was really bad with their run blocking. I know that the numbers game wasn't working in their favor, but we know this Eagles' offensive line to be a really good offensive line. They didn't play like it yesterday, and the poor officiating didn't help the Eagles either. All this being said, the Eagles, even though they suffered a loss yesterday, Lions-Vikings win, Lions over the Bears, and the Vikings over Seattle, Philadelphia's still in the race for the number 1 seed. The path is a lot harder, but it's still possible. Here's how Philadelphia can get home field advantage and the number 1 seed with that first round bye. Eagles have to win out. The Lions have to lose to the Niners on the road. Vikings have to lose to the Packers. Now, Lions are 3.5-point favorites against San Francisco, and the Niners are dreadful this year. The Packers can easily beat Minnesota. The Packers are a really good team. And then furthermore, the Vikings would then have to beat the Lions in the final week of the regular season. The Eagles could then get the number 1 seed via common opponents and that tiebreaker over Minnesota. So that is the pathway for how Philadelphia can still get that number 1 seed. I'll do a video on that probably later on today. It's not going to be easy, though. I'll tell you this game against the Dallas Cowboys becomes a lot more interesting in Week 17, given that the Eagles are coming off this loss. Maybe their confidence knocked a little bit. And the Cowboys are playing really well despite being eliminated from playoff contention. And look, as an Eagles fan and as the host of this show, and because it's so easy to do, I troll the Dallas Cowboys a lot. I have to give them credit. And I'll always eat the crow when I'm wrong. I'll admit my mistakes, and I'll give credit where credit is due. Mike McCarthy deserves credit. He's coaching his ass off right now. He's done a hell of a job. The Cowboys are a botched block punt away, and that's classic Cowboys, to botch a blocked punt from having won 5 games in a row with Cooper Rush as the team starting quarterback. And even though the Cowboys were officially eliminated from playoff contention prior to that Sunday night game against the Bucs, that was one of the most hard-hitting games that I have seen in recent memory. And they beat up a really good Buccaneers team. And they're without Overshown, who's a really good player, Cooper Rush at quarterback. And so Cowboys are playing really good. They're playing balanced on offense. They're physical and fast on the defensive side of the ball. Mike Zimmer doing a much better job as a defensive coordinator. And with the Eagles having uncertainty at the quarterback spot, even if Jalen Hurts plays, I expect this game to be a dogfight. And, of course, if Philadelphia wins, they will win the NFC East. But Vic Fangio's defense has to play better after giving up all those points to Washington. All right, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll be back a little bit later with another video here on Eagles Now. It might be the holiday season, but the content won't stop.